Oh, YouTube thumbnails, how I loathe your chunky text and neon colors, your wacky photos and unrealistic scenarios, your odd and quirky sense of humor, and of course your overly emotional sensibilities. In this section, we're going to create 3 awesome YouTube thumbnails together, and we're going to practice being able to create something that's really compelling and clickable. So what makes a YouTube thumbnail clickable? And that's really the main premise and goal of a thumbnail, is to entice people and tell people the story of the video, or give them a great idea of what's inside the video so that they click and they're not disappointed. So YouTube thumbnails are not very big. The original size is 1280 by 720, but when they're displayed in the YouTube feed, they're much smaller than that size. So you got to be able to look at your design at this size and be happy with it. You can read any text that's on there. You can really understand the concept of what the video is about, and it communicates all of that in this very, very tiny thumbnail image. So in this case, this is actually one of my design lessons that I have on my YouTube channel, but you can see how I have the product and I have a nice, clear, high contrast lettering. I can read this very well. We're going to move on and show you some other examples. This is another one by Dansky, which is another great graphic design instructor, and this is one for Puppet Warp, and he has kind of this two-tone division where he kind of shows his whole concept of what's a video about. It's high impact, there's people in it, we always connect with people better than objects, and nice clear typography. I can read it, there's an icon that tells me it's a Photoshop tutorial, and it's very clear. The next one uses iconography and very simple solid boxes to communicate a nice, clean, clear thumbnail. So this works really well for illustrating some kind of vector line art, in this case, the little video in the background. And then you have the kind of the cyan blue bar that runs across with nice, clear, high contrast white typography. And you noticed all the typography, you don't see a lot of thin weighted typography, you see a lot of bold type, because think of how small this is. This is a very small image, and you got to be able to read it from a distance, because not everybody reads your title. Sometimes they look at the thumbnail first. This is another one of mine. I've kind of used the diagonal line to kind of divide the image up a little bit, so you kind of have this green and then you have a white background, so they really pair well together, and nice clear typography. I'm not trying to put the whole headline on my YouTube thumbnail. You just can't do that. You put a very abbreviated, shorter version of your video title on the cover. And also, if you're using any software, put the software logo on there so people know right away what you're using. And this is for if you're doing client work, if you're doing thumbnail work for a client who might be a YouTube personality or someone who produces a lot of videos. You're going to need to create these images very fast and very quickly, because sometimes they need one every single day. So the example we're going to do in the class, we're going to try to do it in under 20 minutes. We're going to try to do it in under 20 minutes to practice trying to do a thumbnail as quick as possible, but also making a nice high impact one as well. Okay, here's an example of one I did a while back, just kind of showing a product design that I show how to do in the video on YouTube. And I tried to use kind of this fading into black so that the type can really be readable. And to be honest, I can even remove the smaller type on the thumbnail if it's going to be viewed very small. So a lot of people, when they design YouTube thumbnails, they look at it at this size. But when you design, sometimes it's actually kind of nice to zoom out a little bit so you can kind of get that final perspective of what that size is really going to be. So I like to zoom out a lot and get that perspective and get an idea of how small this thumbnail really is going to be shown on the YouTube platform. Here's another example of the diagonal action going on. It's not just kind of a straight down division. It's this diagonal line that cuts it all the way down. It kind of brings both sides together, and high impact, high contrast type on a white background, and of course kind of a duotone purple image on the top. And here's another one, just making sure if you're using any software, that logo is nice and big so people understand right away what the video and concept is about. I use this background image. It's not overtaking the type. It's just a background image, but it helps communicate what the video is about. And before we hop into Adobe Photoshop to create these 3 YouTube thumbnails, I have a couple of downloadable resources that are going to be really helpful throughout this section. So if you access those, we have a few different files. We have an image file that we're going to use for the very first thumbnail. We also have this prompts PDF, which contains over 6 different YouTube thumbnail project prompts. The first 3 we're going to work together in the class. And there's also access to a template that you could just double click and you have it sized and everything is ready to go. But we're also going to be creating that together as well so you can understand sizing and how to export your document at the end as well. So let's get started with the first prompt. This is going to be a ultimate seltzer taste test. So like a soda taste test type of video. It's going to be a product review video, and I'm going to read the description. This video will feature 30 different Seltzer soda brands in an ultimate showdown for taste and overall flavor. Your goal is to create an eye-catching thumbnail that can grab viewers, but also communicate the video's main premise. You can choose to focus and use the supply graphic or use your own. So in this case, we have a seltzer taste test. We want to really have this main focal point, this main communicate what's in the video, which is all about tasting seltzers. So let's do some seltzer cans. And what I did is I created this graphic in Adobe Dimensions for you so you don't have to sit there and worry about trying to find seltzer can pictures. Plus you have all the rights to use this however you want in your portfolio. So I wanted to supply a graphic that you can use. So I created this in Adobe Dimensions, which is a really neat 3D kind of mock-up program. And I even walked through the basics of it later on in the course too, which is cool. And the Design Trends 2021 lessons. So I'm going to open up, I have a PNG, which is just going to be a transparent background, but I also have a Photoshop file that you can also open. Either one is fine. Let's open up the Photoshop file. So here it is. We have this background color that we can change to any color we would like, but we don't really need that right now. We just really need this layer, which is going to contain the soda cans. So let's open up a new document and create a YouTube thumbnail size. So I have this template, and a YouTube thumbnail size is 1280 by 720 pixels. So let's go ahead and open up a new file, File New. So 1280 by 720. Resolution is not going to matter too much when you have pixels, because that means pixels are going to be pixels. You have 1280 pixels in width and 720 in height, and the resolution doesn't really matter all that much until you get to printed documents. Now when you have print documents, 300 is the goal to go for all print documents. But when you have pixels, it doesn't matter because the size is the pixels, it doesn't change. So for right now, I'm just going to leave it at 300. And when we export this as a JPEG, you can also scale it up to make it high resolution if you want to make it larger too. So I would just stick with 300 resolution, 1280 by 720, and we're just going to do horizontal orientation. Always be an RGB color if we're doing anything for digital, and just click on create. And that's pretty much it. I can go to view, make sure my rulers are on, and I could create guides. So if I want to click and scroll down, kind of build some margins out. So if I don't want certain text or vital elements to go outside of a certain margin, it kind of helps me keep the design clean and gives me a helpful guide. So I just click and drag, and you can create some margins for yourself. And you have these rulers so you can see up here like how many pixels. So that's 100 pixels right here. This is really guides. There is no rule on YouTube about margins and all that stuff like there is on social media platforms. And another thing you could do is you can make it an artboard. So right now this is just a regular canvas. It is not an artboard. So what you could do if you wanted to just make it an artboard, when you open up the new document, you can go to File, New, and there's this little thing you can tick right here. It says Artboards, and it's going to create an artboard. And what's different is an artboard allows you to resize it dynamically, but it allows you to create multiple different areas that you can export as separate elements. So let me go ahead and demonstrate. So I have this, I don't have this as an artboard right now, but there is an artboard tool. If I click and hold right here on the Move tool, go right down to the Artboard tool, and I have that selected. And with that selected, I can go ahead and click and drag and just make this an artboard. So you can always resize your artboard in your properties, or you can resize it right up here. And what's great about artboards is, let's say I'm doing a series of YouTube video thumbnails, I can create 3 others. Just do the addition sign, create another one, and then create another one. And so now I have 3 of them, and when I go to File and Export As, and do some JPEGs, I can save all 3 artboards and 3 different JPEGs all at the same time. What we had to do years ago is we had to have a separate document for each YouTube thumbnail. So let's say we had 30 different YouTube thumbnails. We need to have 30 different Photoshop documents saved. And I had to open up each one to change them and then save them. And that took a lot of time. So a few years ago, they added artboards to Photoshop, and it has been wonderful. And I have a lot less Photoshop files around. And let's say you want to edit one particular artboard size, you just have to click right here on the name. And if you ever have used Adobe XD before, it's very similar. So I'm going to click right here on the artboard name, and I can go up here and change the size. If I wanted to make it taller than the others for whatever reason, I can. And you can also click and hold and drag this around so you could kind of arrange these however you want to organize. And if I'm done with the artboard, I just have to press the delete button and it's gone. You will also notice in your layers panel that each artboard has its own kind of file system or layer system. So you have artboard 3 here and then artboard 1 here, and they all function almost like a different document, but it's in a different subfolder. So let's say I'm drawing on this one. Let's say I just draw a square. Let's say I draw a few shapes here. If I scroll down, you'll see these 2 rectangle shapes right here in artboard 3. And then if I'm on artboard 1, I can create something. So it's kind of their way of handling almost different documents in a way in the same document. So let's go back to our template that's already kind of made for us. I already put some margins on here. You can toggle this off and on. You could toggle the text off. We don't really need the text, so I'm going to keep that toggled off. And right now, I don't need the margins. I will toggle those on when I start bringing in some typography and finalizing everything. So I'm going to toggle that off here. So let's begin. We have the Seltzer thumbnail, and we want to really focus on what is the main subject matter of the video, and that's going to be the Seltzer cans, the multiple cans that they're going to taste. So let's bring in that PNG. So I'm just going to copy this, and you can even just make this a new thumbnail and drag it in. I like dragging things in, but you could just copy this layer, selecting the layer. This is the long way to do it. Edit, copy, and then go down here and edit, paste. Or you can just drag it right in. It's going to say the target document has a different depth than the source document. This may result in a lower than expected quality. Are you sure? Go ahead and just click yes, that is fine. That has to deal with how I rendered it in Adobe Dimensions. Don't worry about that right now. Bring it in. Okay, here we go. So let's go ahead and make sure it is a smart object. So converting to smart object, and let's scale this down and find the right position. So we have this thumbnail, and we can either feature it on the left or the right. So most people read from left to right. Not all countries, but most countries read from left to right. So the most important thing you want to have on the left, and the supporting image you want to have on the right. That's not an official rule, just something just to kind of keep in mind. And I figured we have these cans, but they just have question marks on them. They're not actually different Seltzer brands. So the only way to know if it's a Seltzer taste test is in the typography. So let's go ahead and have that on the left, and then have the supporting image on the right. So let's bring the typography in. So if we go back to our prompt, we can go ahead and type in the full video name. And this is already in all caps because that's how I had it on the PDF document. We'll go ahead and keep it all caps for right now. So let's find a way to break this down further. We don't have to include all of the words in this headline. That is not a requirement, but it's so short that I think we will be able to do it. And I think the most important words in here are Seltzer taste test. That describes the video pretty much. And the ultimate is a supportive phrase. So let's break this up. So we have Seltzer taste test on its own line. So we can just copy, go ahead and hold down Option, drag, and then paste. So we have the ultimate, and then Seltzer taste test can be much bigger. We'll continue to just break this down into different lines. Now we have to figure out what font to use for this. And I love condensed typefaces, as you've seen earlier. So let's use the one we've used in the past. Let's do Komu A, but you can use any other condensed typeface that you feel comfortable with. Just type in condensed when looking in Google Fonts, and you'll be able to find a lot of different options. So let's type it in, Komu. So now we can make words a little bit bigger. And this ultimate's important, but we can maybe isolate this somehow with contrast, maybe put it on a different background and kind of keep these all together. So it reads like the ultimate and then Seltzer taste test. So those feel like they're divided. If we kept them all the same size and put the ultimate, it would just be too much, too many words. So we have to find ways to emphasize certain words over other words. And I'm going to go back on this. I'm going to make these all the same size. Let's make them all 50 points and see how that works. I think that might read a little bit better, be more consistent. And I have my margins that help me kind of know not to extend text too close to the edge, because it starts to get really anxious, a kind of some negative tension when we have it like that just, in some cases, stylistically, that is okay. But I think for readability, I kind of like adhering to the margins at least a little bit. So let's divide up this ultimate. Let's separate it a tiny bit. We could do that by adding a simple rectangle tool. Drag this all the way down in the layering system, and let's make that nice and bright, high contrast white. And what's great is there's emphasis still put on the ultimate. It's not disappearing just because it's put on a different colored background. I can do that in the layering system by holding down Shift and selecting all of my text layers, or I like to have auto select on for layers, and I just like to kind of hold down Shift and just click everything I want to move. So I have all that as a group, and I can just shift it down. So there's something missing here. We need color, we need a background, we need something to kind of really bring this to life. So let's make the subject matter a lot bigger. Let's make it real dramatic. Make it pretty in your face. And in some ways, we might even be able to tuck the seltzer behind, just going to drag this down behind the R, kind of make it feel like it's more in the foreground. And sometimes you don't know what works until you try it. Sometimes you don't always have to have this perfect plan. When you start designing, you just kind of move things around and see what feels right. So let's add a background. So there are a lot of white thumbnails on YouTube. Let's try a black thumbnail. So I can add a new layer and make it white. So we could just get the rectangle tool and draw a box and make it black. We can go down here to this little black and white looking circle, click on it. We can go up here to solid color, click on solid color, and it's going to automatically add just a solid color for us if we just wanted to have a simple background color. That's one way to do it as well. So this went down here and went to solid color. It just automatically adds this layer for us. So let's drag that all the way down. Let's just take a moment to rename our layers. I don't always rename them, but sometimes I find that I have to. So I'm going to lock this background just so I don't accidentally select it. So that's locked. So let's just switch all these to white. So just going to double click both and just switch them to white. I'm just going to select the layer and switch them all to white. And of course we have to pick out some color here for this. This box was black, so now we have to pick a color. So what color do we choose? So as we studied in thumbnails, and if you ever go to YouTube and look at thumbnails, super bright, super high contrast stuff is in. As much attention grabbing stuff as you can get away with, that's what's done in thumbnails. Subtlety does not win on YouTube thumbnails. So let's pick this super insanely bright color to be our contrast color. So we could do this nice kind of turquoise color. We could also try this super bright yellow color. Let's go ahead and click here on fill, and let's see if we can't maybe add just a hint of orange to it to kind of complement the gold a little bit. So let's just bring it down just a tiny bit. There we go. Now it's not just plain yellow. There's another color in there kind of mixing in there, a little orange. So now we need to make this black. So I thought what I'd do is I'd sample a little bit. This is not really black. This is like a dark, dark, dark navy color almost. So I'm just going to sample in there. As much as you can sample from your subject matter or photography, the more you do that, the more cohesive everything feels. And this is where things get interesting. So we have the Seltzer taste test. It's all white. It all blends together. It's just one big chunk. One way we can really accentuate Seltzer is to make it the same color as this high contrast yellow. So let's do that. Let's get our eyedropper tool and make that yellow. Instantly, that just jumps out at you. You see the ultimate Seltzer, and then now you're hooked and you see taste test. So that just bringing in that color has really made this a more enticing layout. I want to try something. I want to drag these cans. I'm not sure I'm happy with this final placement. I think the size is okay, but let's see if we can't make this more dynamic. Let's make this a little bit bigger. Let's bring it down. So that really brings it way more into the foreground. And we want to make sure that the R is not covered where it doesn't look like an R anymore. That's always really hard to cover letters sometimes because then it starts to become hard to read. So you just have to be super careful. So that all of a sudden we're not worrying about the shadows at the bottom of the cans anymore, and we brought it out. We were able to make it bigger and make it feel like it's right in your face. So now we need something happening in the background. I think this is an okay basic layout, but we need more dynamic pop for YouTube thumbnail. Well, when you open up a seltzer can, what's the best thing about a can of seltzer or a can of soda? Is that fizz that pops out of the top when you open it. It's so refreshing, and when you think of tasting that, you think of the complex flavors of the bubbles when you drink it. So let's try to find, we're not going to be able to find soda pictures per se that are opening. Maybe we can, but water, I mean, seltzer is mostly water. It's carbonated water. So as long as we find water kind of exploding, then I think we can use that. So let's head over to pexels.com and check it out and see what we can find. So let's find water. So let's just type in water and see what comes up. And we're seeing just kind of plain water, but we're not really seeing splash. So I think what I need to type in now is the word splash. There we go. That's more like it. I think this is one of these is perfect. This is already on a black background, so that's helpful too. But we're going to use blending mode, so it doesn't really matter what color background it's on. So let's go ahead and download this one. Free download. Say thank you to Rias. Thank you. So let's drag this right in. I'm going to drag it right into the document, and it's going to automatically make it a smart object. Perfect. So now I'm going to make it big enough to look like it's exploding from the can, and press enter, and I'm going to move it to the back. So move it all the way down to the background. So now we need to make it look like it's exploding from the top of the can. So maybe right about there. And we can get rid of all of this easily by doing a layering mask. So let's do a layering mask on this background splash photo. Let's get our nice soft round brush so it gives it a nice feathered look, and let's go ahead and paint with black to erase. We don't need to have limes in there. And let's say you had a different colored background in there, so let's unlock this background layer, and let's say we had this a different color. Let's say it was red. Well, let's say I want to really blend that in, and it's got this black background, and you'd have to remove the black background. Well, that's a mess. So you can select this object and do a blending mode and have it blend right in. So maybe screen. You can have it screen back, and you don't have to sit there and remove the background. So that's kind of fun. So you can have like dark blue, whatever color you want. You don't have to do black. And we can even, this is interesting, we don't have to do this, but it's going to show you gradient maps, which we've done a lot. We can apply a gradient map to this layer right here. So I'm going to go up to image. I'm just going to apply it to that one layer. So just going to go through adjustments and do a gradient map. And let's keep black as the shadow color. And for the highlight color, we can do any color. We can even bring out this yellow color. So that's really interesting. Of course, now it's starting to look like beer or mellow yellow or something that's orange. But I just wanted to show you, if you wanted to create a different color, you can easily apply a gradient map to this as well. So I feel like we're really close to being done. Let's do some final touches to the typography. So something that's kind of popular, I want to show you. You don't always have to do what's popular. You don't always have to follow trends. But I wanted to kind of discuss kind of what's been going on with drop shadows and having a look a lot like what I'm showing you here. We have these drop shadows kind of giving this layered look to the typography. That's easy to add by doing layer styles. So each layer has a layer style. And I can't remember if I went over this, but I'm going to go over it again. So you have this layer right here. So Seltzer, this is our typography layer. I want to add a drop shadow to that. I'm going to double click right here in kind of the blank space of the layer system right here. You click right here on this layer. It's going to open up a layer style panel. And when we do the next project, which is going to be a book, we're going to go over layer styles in a lot more detail and how to save them and all this great stuff. So don't worry if this is just super duper brief, but we're going to go in more detail later. So I want to add a simple drop shadow. I'm just going to select drop shadow, and you can change the distance of the drop shadow, the spread, and the size. So I'm going to make it a full opacity, and I want to make sure Seltzer is the top layer of the typography. So let's bring this all the way to the top. And we have and what we could do, we can even create a folder, select all of our typography and put it in a folder. And that just helps me know that this is the typography. Kind of groups it for me. I don't have to sit there and hunt for it. So now I know that Seltzer's on the top, taste is next, and test is at the bottom. And so I'm going to do a drop shadow on Seltzer. And you can kind of see it casted a little bit here on the top of the taste. So what it does, it kind of gives it a sense of placement and a sense of belonging with each other instead of just existing as separate elements. Since they're casting a shadow on each other, they feel more like they're together. So I can reduce the size a little bit. That's a very tiny effect here. I just noticed on Instagram, everybody seems to be doing this effect. So this is before. That's before, it's kind of flat, and that's after. And it's not these super strong shadows either. They're not you can easily date yourself by doing super strong drop shadows. Just kind of gives it this depth. And while I'm here, I want to show you another cool thing, just if you want to do it someday. So let's say I want to put an effect on just this typography and I want to crop it, like I put an image on it and it only shows in through the word Seltzer. What if I were to bring in this again, this little splash, bring it on top, and I can use clipping mask and I can clip it to just the typography so it crops it around just the typography layer. So I have this little image right here above my Seltzer right here, and I'm going to take my splash water layer. I'm going to hold down Option like we did before, and this is going to create a clipping mask. So holding down Option, I believe it's Alt for Windows, I'll have to double check that, and then I'm going to click once and it's going to apply a clipping mask to that. And what's really neat is I can move this around and make it bigger. And it looks like the Seltzer is the water. That might not be the right effect for what we have now, but I just wanted to show you how you can do that. You can do that with gold and glitter and all sorts of crazy textures to have that effect. If you want to unclip it, you hold down Option, Alt, and then you have that little X out, and then just unclip it and then delete it. So for right now, I think a clean look works. I think there's one thing missing. I feel like we have lots happening, but let's create that sense of depth again. So we can put our cans on top again. So let's go ahead and I think it got pulled down because I put all the type into a folder. So what I need to do is just bring that right above here. And we could put a little drop shadow on the cans. So it looks like you added a little drop shadow here to look like they belong together. So let me toggle that off. And then toggle that on, just to kind of see what we're doing. Okay, so we have a great background. I feel like the cans are in the foreground. I feel like we can add one more thing to the foreground to really add even more dramatic depth to this piece. Let's duplicate the splash layer. So I'm just going to right click duplicate. There's also a keyboard shortcut I'm ready to introduce. That's Command J. So to have this splash highlighted, going to do a quick Command J, and that is going to create a copy. Let's drag that all the way in the top. It's in the top. I want to create a splash in the foreground, so I'm going to bring this down, and this is when I'm going to use a blending mode. So let's do a blending mode that's going to allow just the splash and not the background to pop through. So that's most likely going to be our lighten and screen on dark backgrounds, like we studied in the double exposure lessons. So let's do lighten, and we don't want to have too much splashing going on. So we can use a layering mask to delete some of this extra splash and only keep what we want. So let's do that. Let's create a layering mask. It looks like a layering mask is already created from before. So we just click right there and we're able to paint away with black, and let's make it nice and big so it feathers it away nicely. We don't need too much splash, especially in the near the words. We don't want to make it too busy. We don't have to have it splash all the way over, just like a little splash to bring everything together. And let's bring that down so it's not too much. It might be making it smaller might be what solves the issue. See, there's where it looks like it's really splashing. And we can add a little more spacing right here. I feel like it's a little tight, a tiny bit tight. So let's select both of these. I'm just doing my down arrow key. It's going to tap down and then do this one and tap down, do test. Just to give just a tiny bit more breathing room, especially when we did the drop shadow effect. We want to give some breathing room there. And we can round these corners. Well, they're already rounded, but maybe we can make them straight. Straight corner. Kind of gives it a more contemporary look. And one thing we didn't do that I really want to do is I really want to edit this photo. This has not been edited. I think we can make this even better right here. This is our main subject matter. Now that we're finished with the layout, we can really do our refinement in photo editing. So I think we can sharpen this image to really bring out the details of the can. So I have this subject matter selected, and I'm going to just go up and do a quick sharpen. Just one sharpen. You can over sharpen really easily. So this is before, so that was nice, but this is after sharpen. It just kind of really brings out the bubbles on the can. It really makes it feel higher resolution. Let's also bring out the colors. So we have this gold, we have this kind of really dark gray color in the middle. Let's bring those colors out more. Let's just do a quick image adjustment. Let's go to vibrance, see if we can't bring out more of that color. So you notice that's before and that's after. It kind of adds more gold to that. We can even make it more saturated. And what I want to do, let me go to hue and saturation. So let's add just a tiny hint of copper. So we're going to adjust this hue slider. This is just the quickest way to do it. And I'm just going to bring it a little bit to the left. It's going to almost make it like a copper look. I think that'll pair better with it, the yellow. Click OK. Let's see, what else can we do here? We can go to image, brightness, contrast. If we want to bring the contrast on this higher on the cans, we can. That makes the difference between the highlights and shadows more big. So let's increase the contrast. So let's increase it all the way, so that's going to make it really pop. And then of course that's a reduction in contrast. So let's just add a little contrast. We could make them brighter, but I think it's already a pretty good brightness. We don't want to make it too bright because then it makes that washed out looking. So let's not worry about brightness. Of course, we can do a much more simple yellow background as well if we wanted to do something more simple. Very easy to do with everything you know. There's so many different variations of each one, and you have to figure out which one will work the best because you could do so many different combinations. But there you have it. There's our first YouTube thumbnail. It's got a real dramatic look. We have lots of layers happening here. We have a nice background, a nice foreground, a nice high contrast color, clean typography. I think this works really, really well to grab people's attention. So now we have another thumbnail we're going to do. We're going to do a little bit more of a feminine, soft look for a travel channel. Now it's time to do the second YouTube thumbnail. This one's going to have that softer look. It's for a travel channel. And this one's going to be very basic. They're just starting the channel. It's brand new. It's just going to be travel hacks. Very simple words. They're going to have a much longer YouTube video name, but we're just going to call it travel hacks on the thumbnail. So let's get started. It's going to feature a young lady who's traveling around. She's going to have all these travel hack tips for you. So very, very simple premise. So what we need to do is head on Pexels and see if we can't find our main hero image. This will be the person that will be the star of the show. So let's go ahead and go into Pexels and type in travel and see kind of what comes up, what kind of figures come up. If this was a real client situation, they'll probably supply you with images where you'd have to isolate them from the background and use them on the thumbnail. In this case, this is fictitious, so we need to find our headshot. I'm trying to find a nice clean image I can easily cut out and looks like someone who is traveling and having a good time. I'd like to see faces when it comes to YouTube thumbnails and people being personas in their channels. It's really nice to have faces. That's the emotional connection, is being able to show a face. So like this image probably wouldn't work really well because she's facing away and looking at the city. She's kind of disconnected from us as the audience, and you don't want that disconnect. So I found this lovely lady right here that I'm going to go ahead and quickly isolate and bring into the YouTube thumbnail template. So let's do a selected mask. Just going to go select and mask. She does have hair, so we'll see what a quick select subject does. That did a pretty good job. And let's go ahead and do a refine hair, just in case there's some hair that needs. I didn't like how that looked. Let's go ahead and zoom in and see what happened here. So it took a nice chunk of her hair there. So let's go ahead. I'm just going to do a Command Z, which is going to go back one step. There we go. Let's not do refine hair. We will refine it ourselves. We can always soften, maybe do a slight feather if we feel like she's going to be cut out too sharply, and like a slight smooth. Notice how little I did that. Let's go ahead and mask her. So let's use a layering mask and mask her out. So now we just have her. She's gigantic, so let's make this a little bit smaller. And let's first, as always, make sure she is a smart object before we start to scale her down. Now we can scale her down and bring her in. So the right placement. That's going to depend on the typography. So I like to have a person's gaze or their look to look at the typography or headline. So in this case, she's kind of looking at us, but also looking kind of facing the left. So we want the typography to be on the left, or if we reflect her, we can have the typography on the right. So let's just reflect her. So that'll be easy by going up to Edit. You go down to Transform, and you have all sorts of ways to kind of move her. So we can rotate clockwise. And this is one I use all the time, flip horizontal. It's just going to flip her around and she's going to face the other direction. So here is our main hero image. So let's go ahead and add our typography in next. We can toggle all this off for now. So let's open up our prompt. Prompt number 2. It's just going to be travel hacks. That's pretty simple. So just travel hacks. This is whatever typography we used in the last video. Let's make this a little bit bigger. So we want this to have a softer, more feminine look. So we want to change the typography to reflect that. Let's do a nice, round, soft script typeface for travel. And then hacks can be also soft, but maybe do some font pairing here where they're different typeface categories altogether. So let's make this kind of a straight, simple sans serif and this a nice, flowy script. So let's, instead of Komu, so I can go to Filter and let's go down to Script. So now I don't have to worry about all this other typefaces going on here. So this one's really nice. It's got some nice unique character. I don't know how readable the T is. The T and L, is it a J? Readability is very important. Remember, YouTube thumbnails, I'm going down here and I'm going to type in 25%. Sometimes they can be as small as, let's say maybe it's 35% right here. They could be as small as that. And if you can't read it from there, it's not going to be worthwhile having it. So let's go ahead and zoom back in. Let's go ahead and zoom in at 150%. So let's try a different one. Looking for readability. They all have their own characteristics as we studied before. So this one almost looks like it's scribbled on with a marker. Some of them are really fancy. So let's see this one right here. So this one's really traditional and fancy, and that wouldn't really go super well with what they're doing. We need kind of more youth, more modern. So I went with this one. So this one's called Al Fresco. It's readable, yet it has some smooth kind of angles to it. And so for hacks, let's find some font pairing here. So we know we definitely want a sans serif. So let's go to sans serif. And I'd like to keep it lowercase because lowercase lettering is naturally more soft in appearance and tone than uppercase. Uppercase is super strong. Let's keep it lowercase characters. And we don't want anything with a whole lot of personality. We want something fairly plain because we have a lot of personality already in travel. So what about Fat Frank? It's super chunky and it's super easy to read. There is personality here, but since it's so chunky, it's simple enough, I think, to work. That's called Fat Frank. Of course, you can use it. You don't have to use these. You may not have access to them if you don't have an Adobe Creative Cloud subscription. Most of you guys do, but if you don't, Google Fonts has all sorts of similar typefaces. So now here's the hard part. We need to create a narrative. We need to create an enticing narrative. This person's going to be traveling all over the world. We need to create that because right now it's just a plain background. We can make it pretty colors, but it's not going to mean anything. It's just going to be a girl in some headline. It's not going to mean anything. So let's make her a bit smaller so we can really make room for a narrative. So it's making it smaller. You can kind of see her hat a little bit more. And with script typefaces, it's hard to align these. So that would be a perfect left alignment, but that doesn't feel aligned at all. So a lot of times you just have to kind of tuck that typography into a nice natural occurring space. So maybe right about here. So that's kind of why I have it a little bit off to the right. Okay, so now let's find some awesome travel photos. So travel, we're right here. We need to figure out what images might really help to tell that story of her traveling. We can always do an airplane. You know, we can download an airplane and it's like she's traveling, but you know, it feels a little artificial just being on an airplane, but we can try it out. Drag it all the way down to the bottom. You know, it just kind of feels artificial. We really want to put her in her place. She has a hat on. She's obviously somewhere warm. We have this awesome Eiffel Tower photo we can download. You can even do the Statue of Liberty. Ooh, that's a nice angle. So that we have a couple things downloaded we can try out. So we could try out 2 photos. Sometimes one photo doesn't always help to describe the whole narrative. So I just drug both of those in. They're already smart objects, so I can move them around. This is what I originally came up with the concept, and I ended up doing something else, but this could work for you. She can split the difference between the 2 photos. Move her here, and there's not a whole lot of room to put that. This is just all trial and error. And you can screen that back or put a gradient map on it to have this be able to pop out. So let's say I want to add a gradient map to everything that's at a certain level. Let's go over to adjustments. Let's see where my adjustments panel is. I think there it is right here. And let's do gradient map. We can add some color to that if we want, like blue. And the shadows can be a darker blue. What's great about this gradient map being applied with adjustments is now I can drag, it's its own layer, so I can drag it all the way above the other image of the Statue of Liberty. And so I'm building that narrative, and then I can make this typography white instead of gray. And we're building that narrative. We can make it even change the gray. We can add a layering mask, kind of mask out the busy background here of the Eiffel Tower. They can, of course, you want to show the top of it. What's the point if you can't show the whole thing? So it could be that, you know, sometimes a photo just doesn't work. You want it to work really bad, but just with the typography, it might not work. Let's try something else. No big deal. Let's keep the Statue of Liberty. I have this awesome photo here. I'm going to bring in. You can use whatever you want. This is all found on Pexels when I typed in the word travel. There's a lot of busyness down here. There's a car down here, but we could do a layering mask and just blur that out. And I'm not sure if I showed this to you yet, but I'm going to show you again. I'm going to get the gradient tool. So I'm over here in my toolbar. I have the gradient tool. It's set to default, which is just black to white. That's default. So as you know, with layering masks, black erases and white brings it back. So you could do the same thing. And I'm right here. I'm on my layering mask on this layer. I'm going to do the same thing with a gradient. I can apply a gradient, or everything that's black is going to disappear and everything that's white is going to stay there. So it's like a quick way to instantly blur something. So instead of getting the brush and brushing the bottom, you could just get a gradient tool and just fade away the bottom. So let me do the opposite. There we go. Fade it away. Nice gradual fade, just like that. So that really helps the typography to stand out. So we can do a few things. We can really warm this up. So right now it's blue. But what if I were to warm this up? It's a nice sunny day. She has a hat on. Let's bring out some warm colors. We can even sample some colors she has in her hat. So that's going to be our dark highlight color. So let me do this color. And let's do a dark color for shadows. Just kind of warms it up a tiny bit. Let's bring a little bit more contrast so it pops out. So that angle's a bit weird. I wonder if I can reflect that. Here we go. It could be that When an image doesn't work, it's okay, you tried. Let's bring more emphasis on her, and we can make that bigger. And right now, everything blends together because they're similar colors, but we can have that pop of contrast that we need. We need to add that to this because it is YouTube and you have to be high contrast. So let me create a box. Let me angle it. Just something to bring her out and make her pop out of that background. And let's make that a high contrast. Let's say purple. Purple's still soft and feminine. Like a deep purple. The other way. Let's bring that building out more. Let's go to our gradient map. Let's put a tiny bit more contrast by, I know I say the word contrast a lot, but I'm telling you, contrast is king when it comes to design. It's going to take you a while to find the right color. I think we can afford to make travel a little bit bigger. And something else we can try is I downloaded this map. There it is. I thought maybe this would be a neat little small texture that we can add. That's pretty neat right there, just on its own. And it already applied the gradient map to it because the gradient map just automatically is on top, so it applies that gradient map. That looks really cool as is. We can bring more focus on that compass and have it tuck perfectly between the T and the L. How cool is that? That's pretty neat. This is an accident. You know, I talk about in the How to Be Creative video how some things happen by accident. You know, I didn't plan that. That picture just, all of a sudden, if you get really stuck with a picture, sometimes just trying another picture will give you a whole new idea. Sometimes a photo, you're trying to force it and it just doesn't work. But anyway, what I originally intended to do is add a little texture to this purple. So I could bring that all the way down next to this purple rectangle. I can do a clipping mask, hold down Option, clip it, and apply a blending mode. Just something pops out on that purple. Luminosity, and that's a lot. There's a lot going on there. So let's reduce the opacity of that layer. I just want like a subtle pop of texture. And we can mess around with this thumbnail forever. There's so many different varieties that we can come up with. And I just wanted to come up with something maybe a little bit softer, a little more feminine for a travel channel. We have one more thumbnail to do, and that's going to be for a graphic designer who wants to start his own YouTube channel, teaching others how to do design. Sound familiar? Well, we're going to do that for this guy right here, Phil. We're going to do that in the next lesson. We have one more YouTube thumbnail to do. This time it's going to be for a graphic design how-to tutorial channel, which many of you, maybe in a few years, will create your own. So here we go. It's for this guy named Phil, totally made up character, but it's going to be Master Graphic Design with Phil is all the necessary requirements or necessary text to put on the YouTube thumbnail. This is going to be a how-to video. And it's going to be this new graphic designer is launching a channel so he could teach others his newly learned skills. He wants to feature geometric shapes and high contrast colors and also a headshot of himself to build brand awareness. So we have this headshot of Phil. I found this on Pexels. You just have to type in headshot man, profile pic, headshot. You're going to find so many others. I actually encourage you to find your own. You don't have to use the same one that I use. And of course, I used to provide links, but since photographers constantly put on new photos, but also take them away, I no longer have active links to these because those links can easily get broken if a photographer removes his photo. So please use any photo that you'd like. So this one, I'm just going to do a select and mask, or I could just do select subject. Sometimes that makes it better. So you can see how I might need to go in and refine that selection. So let's bring him in. So he's looking straight at us. So what I thought we would do, instead of putting him on the left or the right, what if we put him in the center? And let's not zoom out so much on him that we don't emotionally connect with him or really see him, because remember, these thumbnails are super duper tiny. So let's maybe try to find a nice look right about here. So he's right there in the center. We can toggle all these off and we can get to work. First thing is first, we want to get the basic layout planned out. So we have him in the middle. Where are we going to put the headline? So we need master graphic design with fill. So with fill may not be super big because needs to be super big because he's already pretty much overcoming the thumbnail. So maybe make this a little bit smaller and put it down here. Let's do master graphic design bigger. That's the main goal of the video, is to master graphic design. So we can have this all perfectly left aligned straight if we wanted to. You know, that even looks good just like this, and we made everything kind of a left alignment. Put them on like a yellow background, make that thing pop. But we're going to try something a little bit different. Let's add some angle to our typography. We haven't had a chance to do that yet. So let's do that. I'm going to select all of my typography. Just selected, held down Shift, and I got all of them selected. So master graphic design is now all selected. We're going to go up, this is something new I haven't taught yet. We're going to go up to Edit, all the way down to Transform. And we did that when we flipped the image or horizontally, but we have a few other things we can do here. So you notice that some of this is grayed out. That's because right now that's live text. It's not rasterized. So there's some of these that you're not going to be able to do unless it's rasterized or it's not a smart layer. That's okay. We just need skew for now. So we're going to do skew, and this is going to allow us to skew the text. See this upper right transform box right here? I'm going to click and hold and just drag it, and I'm able to instantly add angle to my text. I can also drag it down. I can drag it all sorts of ways, but I'm just going to do a simple drag up. So I thought it would be neat to kind of also move these so they're not all perfectly aligned, kind of going against the grain here. And let's add a little breathing room between the typography. And we can even do outlines. So let's go ahead and double click. Let's go ahead and have our master selected right here. Let's double click. Let's do a stroke. There's stroke. And let's make it, we have to figure out what our final colors are going to be. Let's just do kind of like a dark gray for now, just kind of generic, because I'm not sure if I want to stick with blue or not. Click OK, and then we reduce the fill. We did this a little bit earlier in the course. And we can even double click again back into our stroke options, and we can do, instead of the outside, we can do center. That looks a little bit better. And let's add a little spacing between the typography. We don't want all that to get in the way. So let's add a little spacing right here in Properties panel, add a little bit of spacing. And I can go back in, that might be a little too thick. So let's do 3. And let's say I want to do the same thing to design. Do I have to double click that and add a stroke and reduce the fill all over again? No, we can save with layer styles, which we will do in the next project. I'll go over that again from scratch. So let's save this layer style so I don't have to do it over again. So I'm going to go right here. I double clicked into my layer styles panel. I'm going to click on new style, and I'm going to type in outlined and just have everything clicked. Just don't even touch anything. Just click OK. And now it's saved. So now I can highlight design and apply that layering style. So where do I find that layering style? How do I apply it? You have a separate panel. So we're going to go up to Windows. You make sure your libraries are selected, and it's saved right here in your libraries. If you go right here to outlined, in older versions of Photoshop, there's a separate style panel right here that you can select as well. It's also in your libraries panel. It's also in your styles panel. So if you open up your styles panel, you'll see it right here as well. And if you go down all the way down here, you should find the one that you just saved. And there it is. There's the one. It says called outlines. Now I don't have to do that again. So now if I want to do the same thing with this, let's add that same angle. Edit. Transform. Let's skew it. And there's an angle here that you can type in. If you knew the angle that is, you could just type that in so you can match the angle. And so let's make width outlined. So they said they want to add geometric shapes to this. So here's the thing. It's very left heavy. Let's balance this out. Let's bring something over to the right. Let's bring over with fill. And so it kind of reads left to right and it balances it out a little bit. So let's add some of those geometric shapes that they requested. This will be a great lesson in creating geometric shapes in Adobe Photoshop. So we have our shapes tool. That's the most obvious thing to use. We have a triangle tool. Let's just hold down Shift, create a simple filled in triangle. So let's just right now stick with really high contrast primary colors of red, yellow, and blue. So let's try that blue. And let's duplicate that. Just going to hold down Option and drag, and let's make this a little bit different. First of all, let's hold down Shift and go to the transform. Let me go ahead and zoom in a little bit so you can see. Go ahead and transform this. So I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to rotate this and click it where it's doing the opposite direction. And instead of a fill, let's null that out. Let's make this a stroke and a different color. Let's make it red. And increase the stroke. Just creating some basic geometric shapes. And let's add a sense of layering. We can put this behind the man. So drag him below the man. Let's go ahead and name him. We can create a circle. Let's do a yellow circle. Let me get the ellipse tool and now I can make it yellow. There's yellow. I'm just going to click and hold and put that behind everything. Get my move tool, move it down. So let's say I want to duplicate the circle and I want to make it smaller, and let's make it just a stroke. Use the same recently used color, null that out, make this thicker. And let's say I just want a piece of that to show. So let me get my rectangle marquee tool. This is basically your selection tool. I'm going to click and hold, and I'm just going to select what I want to show. That's all I'm doing is I just made a selection. Now I'm going to go to my layer. It's going to be Eclipse, and sometimes I have to toggle this on and off to find out what layer it is. There it is. I have it selected, and now I can just click on layering mask, and it's going to take that selection and make it show just what was selected. So I'm just going to do add a layering mask. Just like that, I created a cool little shape. So don't worry, we're going to do that again. Let's do that again with the circle. Let's duplicate. Let's go ahead and duplicate this one, and I'm just going to remove, delete the layering mask. Let's do it, but do a semicircle. So I'm going to get the marquee tool, do about halfway point, make sure I have that layer selected, and then go down to layering mask, and boom, I got a semicircle. And I can make that semicircle red, put it over here for balance. We want to balance color, but we also want to balance shape and form. Let's go ahead and make sure I have my layering mask selected. That's why I'm like, I want to select a color, or I want to change the color. It's just giving me layering mask options. Make sure you click back on that layer. Easy mistake to make. Click on red. And now we just have to find balance with everything. I want to have something kind of, another thing overlapping on top of him. Let's create a little pill shape. Let's get a line tool. So it's getting my line tool. Gonna click and hold, creating a simple pill shape. I don't want to fill, I want a stroke, a red stroke. Make it bigger, and I want to add some nice round caps to that. So I'm going to scroll down, and it's going to give me a chance to round the cap. And what I'm going to do, instead of having to do that over again, I'm just going to drag and create a copy, and drag and create a copy. If I ever want to change this, or change the length, I can select my line tool again, and it allows me to change like the length. So if I want to make this next one, I can get the move tool, select this one, line tool, and then it allows me to shorten it or make it longer. So I want to put one on top. Let's put that one on the bottom. Dragging this down. Just kind of looks more layered that way. Let's make him a semicircle like this. And bring that on top. There's no science to this, it's just what feels right, what balances out right. Let's say I want to add a drop shadow to this blue triangle to add depth. I can double click right here in this empty area. And you'll notice, just for some reason, I don't see all my options. If this ever happens to you, click down here to this FX, which is basically effects, and then just click on show all effects. So sometimes when you save like a layer style, sometimes it'll act weird like this. If you ever see this, Just click down here and do show all effects, and then you'll get it all back. So drop shadow, make this real low opacity. I don't want this super strong. And let's put some distance in it too. If you want a nice clean flat design, you can always toggle off the drop shadow and see how that looks. So I just spent another 5 minutes just kind of changing the colors around, trying to find the right balance. And I also made him black and white. I just went up to adjustments, made him black and white, or you can go up here to adjustments and just applied a black and white filter to him. What it does is it takes all the skin tone and hair color and shirt color out of the mix, and it really brings emphasis on the color of the geometric shapes and also the color on the typography. I just thought it helps simplify everything by taking all those other natural colors out of there. So let's add a sense of texture to the background. Right now it's on plain white background. Let's see if I can't find a quick texture on pixels. So we could just type in texture, and there's all sorts of stuff here. We don't want anything too busy. Now this would be interesting. You know, I think of graphic design, I think of some texture. There's also this one, which is really probably what we need, something really simple. It's almost like a wall, like a texture of a wall. Let's see how those look. Let's try this one. Bring that in all the way down in the layering system. There it goes. Adds a little pop, a texture. We can also sharpen it. We can bring in the other one we had. This one might be a bit too busy, and I'm already kind of seeing that. I mean, I like it, but it's just competing too much with we have a lot going on here. So we don't need anything that's going to compete with what we have. So something super simple like this. So let's add a few more patterns. Let's add some patterns. So let's get a rectangle tool. We're just going to draw a box that goes down here. And let's sharpen the corners, not make them rounded. We're going to add a texture to this, or a pattern. So we're going to go right here and double click to get our layer styles panel up. And this time we're going to click on pattern overlay. It's going to put a pattern right on the shape. And in 2021, they updated this, and they have some horrible patterns of like trees and things that you would almost never use. I really miss the old patterns that they had in Photoshop back 2019 and prior. You can always load. If you go up here, it says load. I don't have it because I already loaded it. It'll be load legacy patterns. So you want to load your legacy pattern right here. Just click on here if you don't see it here. And you'll get an extra little drop down box that says legacy patterns and more. This could always change. So if you don't see this, you might have to download a pattern or create it from scratch. But if you go down to legacy patterns right down here, you have to really dig deep into this. Let me make this bigger. You have legacy default patterns. This is what used to just come up when you went right into the layer styles panel. And I miss these because some of them are pretty cool. So let's go in there and we have lots of different ones. We have a diagonal line. We have these dots as well. So let's do the diagonal line. Click OK. And right now it's on this like white background. That's what patterns are, basically putting an image there. So what we want to do is not have this white background, so we could just do a blending mode. So let's try linear burn, and you will notice there's no effect. That's because we need to rasterize the layer styles on this layer first for it to kind of react. So we need to right click on this layer. So this is this layer right here, right click right here in this open area. We need to not just rasterize the layer. We don't need to do that necessarily, but we need to rasterize the layer style. So when we opened up those layer styles, you're rasterizing it. You're no longer making it editable again. So you're rasterizing the layer style, and now it just becomes an image, one flat image. Now I can go back and I can put on blending modes, and it works. Yay! So now I can do linear burn, which I think works best for that. So now you can see the background popping out through there. Okay, let's do that again. Let's put something down below. Now let's get another rectangle tool. Do a rectangle, and let's double click and add a pattern. Pattern overlay. This time we're going to do dots. Boom, just like that. You can also change the scale, scale it down or scale it larger. If you scale it larger, these are rasterized images, so they don't really look really great when you make it larger. So Just bring it down a little bit, just adding some texture and pattern. Click on OK. Let's right click and rasterize the layer style. Layer style panel. This is like a regular image now. Now we can do a linear burn. And let's bring it back behind the man so that it doesn't disrupt him. And it just adds a little bit of something. So there you have it. We're done with our YouTube thumbnails. So next we're going to talk about exporting. How do we export these in the best way we can for YouTube? So we're ready to export our YouTube thumbnails out of here and put them on YouTube. So the best way to export them, especially if you have artboards. So if you have artboards, you want to go up to File, Export, Export As. File, Export, Export As. Don't go to Save As. Go to File, Export, Export As. It's going to do something special. I might have gone over this before, but hey, I'm going to go over it again because it always helps to review things over and over. Right now, we just have one artboard, so it's going to have it selected. Everything we're going to leave default, and this is the best way to export. What is good about this, if I ever want to upscale or export it as a larger, nicer looking file, I can do a 2x or a 3x. So this is going to double the size. So instead of 1280 by 720, it's going to double that, which is going to make it a nice high resolution. We really just need 1x, but sometimes if you want to put it on something bigger, you could do a 2x or a 3x, just kind of letting you know if you ever have anything blurry or it's just not looking really good. Sometimes exporting a 2x or 3x could fit whatever you're trying to do. But 1x is default, and that's okay. Export. So here's our JPEG image. Let's go ahead and zoom out, do a visibility test, which is basically testing it out on the final size it's going to be, which is probably going to be right here. Maybe the outline typography doesn't quite work. That's something we can go back and tweak. From stylistically, if it's a pretty big thumbnail, I think it works well. So you just have to see what works out. Make sure you do a visibility test. Is it practical? Does it work? Do I need to change the stroke to a fill on the master and design and the title? That's something that's up for debate. So let's try exporting. So File, Export As. Let's do a 1x, so I can show you the difference between 1x and 2x. So there is a 1x, there is a 2x that we did. Let's see the difference. One of the things you'll notice is the doubling of size. We doubled the resolution basically of this photo. So now you notice when we do artboard, the 2x, it doubled the pixel size. So it doubled the resolution. So 2560 by 1440. And since almost all of this was smart objects or vector type scalable shapes, we don't really lose a lot when we upscale it, which is great. If we didn't have smart objects on and it tried to upscale it to 3x, it could look like really blurry. But since most of this scales up nicely without blurring, we don't have any problem exporting it as a 2x or a 3x. This is when it gets really cool. So let's say I make multiple artboards. So I have the artboard tool selected. I click on my artboard name and I can just click over this addition. Let's say I have different artboards. Just got my move tool. So I can select my artboard 1. I can select everything in artboard 1. Let's go ahead and go down. Let's unlock this layer. And I can select everything we created. I can just do a copy paste. So Command C and go to artboard 2 to selecting the name and do a Command V. And it's going to paste everything in there. Or I can do a paste in place, paste special, paste in place, and I don't have to sit there and move it. And so let's say I keep doing this. I selected artboard 3, and now I can paste special, paste into place, and I can start to make different versions and iterations. So I can change the colors to make them blue, or shift them over to one side to see how that looks, if I can make the typography bigger, if that works. So this is great when you have a client who needs to have this done quickly, and you could show them a couple of quick variations. Maybe one doesn't have the pattern, one uses a different shape, yada, yada, yada. So now I can easily export all 3 thumbnails. This is great if you have a series. So you have a series that you have 4 or 5 videos coming up. Some YouTubers make 3 videos a week. You can go ahead and create 3 of them in one document and just export it, and you're all done for that week. So you can go to File, Export, export as, and it's going to have all 3 artboards for us right there. And you can uncheck ones that you don't want. Let's say, oh, I already have that one. You can check them, uncheck them, scale it up if you need to. But I'm just going to leave it at 1x. I think that's fine. We just need 1280 by 720. And you click on export and you're done. So now you have all 3 instantly created. And before, you'd have to create a document for each one, which was really annoying. And now I have all 3 JPEGs ready to go. So there you have it. We created 3 YouTube thumbnails in about an hour or less. And hopefully we've learned a couple of new tools like the skew tool. We practiced geometric shapes, patterns, layer styles, and learned a little bit more about layout and telling a story with photos. So I look forward to seeing you in the very next project where we get to do some of this over again and really, really reiterate what we've been learning.